What India is doing is providing an economic upturn of a very impressive proportions, but for a very limited part of its population. And a great deal of that has to do with technical, high-tech stuff that the Indians are very good at, and with this process that doesn't get much play anymore, but which is an ongoing phenomena you should never lose sight of. It used to be called the export of capital, or the export of jobs. More recently, it gets the name outsourcing. The point is, all kinds of work that used to be done in the West, particularly the United States, is now being done in India. One of the biggest sources of growth in India are both Indian and foreign companies that are exploding in doing this kind of work much more cheaply, just as good a quality or better, but much more cheaply than is done here. It has now become normal, for example, if a building is to be erected in New York. The architect designs the building, but then there's a great deal of blueprint work that has to be done. Skilled draftsmen, that's not done here anymore. You just ship the whole business, usually by electronic means, to Hyderabad or somewhere else in India, and the people there do it for much, much less money. The most important innovation, I find this charming, is the tendency now of an increasing number of insurance companies, medical insurance companies, to do the following. You go to your doctor, you're told you need an operation of a certain sort. And you call your insurance company and say, do you cover? Absolutely, we cover under the following conditions. We will take care of your hernia, or whatever it is. And here's how it'll work. On this date, you will go to the airport. What? Yes. You will get on an airplane. We will fly you to New Delhi or someplace else. You will be put up in a first class, and it is, clean, appropriate, beautiful, high-tech hospital. You will be operated on by Dr. whatever, who, by the way, went to the same medical school as the doctors here, a large portion of whom are Indian anyway, as you know. And then you'll recuperate for 2 or 3 days, or a week, and we'll fly you home. And the reason we're doing that is it costs 1/3 of what the exact same operation would cost here in New Jersey. So we're covering you. Well, we're not covered. We never wrote down where you would be covered. And now we're telling you. And by the way, first class transportation, first class accommodation, very comfortable. It just involves a bit of travel. This is now happening more and more. And India, because of the language, same language, English, because of the overlap in the educational system, is in an absolutely extraordinary position to siphon this work. And that's why, by the way, this crisis is interesting in a different way. It is hitting educated, trained, middle management, skilled, professional workers in a way no crisis in America before has done. And that's because a whole new kind of solution to companies that are feeling the pinch is to get the hell out of here. And going to India is a very attractive option. So they are coming through this crisis much less damaged because they have this niche that is keeping them from suffering the way the United States is, even though by doing what they're doing, they're contributing to the troubles here, which is a bit of a reverse of the old colonial arrangement, if you think about it. Last thing about the international, in the time that remains. I want to switch now and go to the advanced industrial part of the world, Europe. And I want to read to you, I'm going to have to translate this from the French very quickly, so bear with me. And for those of you that read French, I have the French here. This is an email I got about 3 hours ago. So today is the 13th of October, and this is an email from Paris, France. What happened in France today will tell you just volumes. Okay, 3.5 million people participated in demonstrations organized in France on the 12th of October at the call of all 6 of the trade union federation. This is a record in France since the beginning of the history of the labor movement. 244 distinct demonstrations across the country. Okay. France has a population 1/5 that of the United States. Therefore, a comparable demonstration in the United States, if we had the same proportion of people, would require 5 times 3.5. If my arithmetic's pretty good, it's 17.5 million Americans would have to demonstrate. We have never come even remotely close to such a thing. Never, ever. What in the world is going on? We met early in September. On the 29th of September, something else happened that was extraordinary. There was an all-European day of strikes and manifestations. On that day, Spain as a society closed for the day. Trains didn't run, buses didn't run, phone calls didn't get made, bread wasn't baked, you name it. Spain had a general strike, very effective. Tens of millions, let me say that again, tens of millions of people across Europe participated, each in their own way in their own country. To give you some highlights of the 29th, the Solidarity Union of Poland, famous in the rest of the world for having brought down Polish communism, seems to have moved to the other side in the interval, and they participated in a demonstration against their government's cooperation with the United States and with austerity. The issue in Europe everywhere is austerity. What does that mean? Let's be real clear here. In all European government countries where the crisis hit, but let's be clear, the crisis in the United States is worse than it is in most parts of Europe. France, for example. The unemployment in France in 2007 was about 7%. And today it's a little over 9%. The unemployment in the United States in 2007 was 5%. And it's now 9.5%, more or less. So the growth in unemployment was much greater here than it was in France. But the French can get 3.5 million people out, even though they have suffered much less from this crisis than we have. That's an interesting situation. In these European countries, even though they didn't suffer as much as we did, they used similar policies. The government went in and flooded the economy with money. The government went in and stimulated by borrowing huge amounts of money to pump up the economy. They borrowed huge amounts, not as big as the United States, but almost. And as they borrowed around the world from their own bankers and from others, these lenders became nervous. These governments are borrowing so much money. The lenders began to say to themselves, whoops, these governments are borrowing so much money that these governments are going to have to tax their people to raise the money to pay us back, to raise the money to pay interest on all that we're lending them. And we're worried that political struggles will develop that will make it impossible for these leaders to do it. We can just see it, marching in the streets saying, how dare you tax us to pay those foreign financiers. Imagine how that would sell here in the US. By the way, most Americans, when I go on radio and television, and I explain that on behalf of the People's Republic of China, I want to thank every one of you, because your taxes accumulate 60, 70 billion a year, which Washington delivers to the People's Republic of Interest. What an interesting slip. People's Republic of China as interest on the money they've lent us. For billions and billions of your tax dollars, all of you, the United States government functions as a collection agency. It collects from you and it delivers to the People's Republic. Americans look at me as if I have just really hurt them. I've said something really tasteless, and they really are offended, as if I made it up. Well, the reality in Europe was that as the borrowing went up, the lenders, and by the way, the lenders are often the banks in the same country. The lenders were getting nervous. For example, Greece, you heard about Greece. Greece got itself into a trouble because its biggest creditors turn out to be French and German banks, are the biggest creditors of the Greek government. They keep lending to the Greeks. They're looking at the debts of the Greeks and they're saying to themselves, the Greeks are the most militant leftists in all of Europe, which they are. If any group of people are going to make it impossible for their government to pay back what we've lent them, it's them. So we're going to say to the Greek government, hello, Mr. Papandreou, come right in here. Sit down. Here's the deal. We don't trust you as far as we could throw you. So we're not going to lend you another nickel. In fact, as the loans come due that you already owe us, we're not going to roll them over. We're not going to keep them going. You're going to be unable to pay anybody anything in about 3 weeks. Unless you do the following. You have to start accumulating a special fund which has no other function than to pay us interest and to repay our loans. And you can do it any way you want, Mr. Puppet. You can either tax the crap out of your people to raise the money, or you can cut all the services and lay off all the workers and hold that money back and ship it to us. But if you don't do that, you're finished, Mr. Papandreou. And you will go down in history as the most hated Greek leader of all time.